Welcome to the Explainer. You know, language models are completely changing the game, right? But here's the thing. They're kind of like fragile giants. Today, we're going to dig into a fantastic tutorial that shows off both their awesome power and, well, their surprising weaknesses. Let's get right into it. All right, before we jump in, just a quick but important heads up. What you're about to see is an overview of a deep 10-module tutorial on why language models can be so fragile. It's all based on a comprehensive report from Virtualization Options LLC, and it's really for general guidance. It's not legal or financial advice, so please, always chat with your own pros before making any big moves. And keep in mind, we're only scratching the surface of what's in the full report here. Okay, let's do this. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to cover what these models are, their brilliance and brittleness, the whole data dilemma, what happens when things go wrong, garbage in, garbage forever, and finally, we'll look at what the future holds. Let's get started. All right, first up, let's cover the basics. We're jumping into modules 1 and 2 here to really understand what language models are all about. So what is a large language model at its core? Well, think of it like a massive statistical engine. It's built on something called a transformer architecture, and its whole job is to learn patterns from just enormous amounts of text. And why? All so it can predict the very next word or token in a sentence. It sounds almost too simple, right? But that one single skill is what powers literally everything from chatbots to code assistants. Now, not all models are built the same. It's kind of like having different tools for different jobs. You've got your decoder-only models, like the GPT series. Think of these as the creative writers, the storytellers. They generate new text. Then you have encoder-decoder models like T5 or BART. These guys are the translators and summarizers. Their job is to transform text. And finally, you've got encoder-only models like BERT. These are the analysts. They're all about understanding and classifying text. Different architecture for a different mission. Okay. Now for the really fascinating part. Let's look at modules 3 and 4, where we pull back the curtain on how these models seem to think and why that very same process is what makes them surprisingly fragile. So when a model generates text, it's not just spitting out words. It's actually going on this kind of wild geometric journey. First, what are called attention heads figure out the most relevant context, that's the state. Then, these networks called MLPs map out a path through this incredibly complex, high-dimensional space, that's the route. And finally, it grounds its prediction in patterns it's already learned. Those are the anchors. It's this whole intricate process just to pick the next word. But here's the kicker, and this quote nails it. The learned geometry isn't perfectly smooth or stable. Basically, that internal map the model is following, it's not a perfectly paved highway. It's full of potholes, unexpected sharp turns, and conflicting signs that can pull the model's prediction in completely different directions. So, why does that matter? Why does this bumpy internal map make these models so fragile? Well, this is where you see that fragility in action. It's why tiny little changes in how you word a prompt can give you a completely different answer. It's why a model can sometimes just forget what you were talking about in a long conversation. That's context collapse. And it's what triggers hallucinations, where a weird question pushes the model off its known map, and it just starts confidently inventing facts. All of it, every one of these problems, stems from that unstable internal geometry. Okay, so if the problem is the unstable internal map, the next logical question is, what's making the map so unstable? And that brings us, as it always does, to the data. This is what modules 5 and 6 are all about. You know, if there's one idea you take away from this whole explainer, it should be this one. The quote says it all. The training data doesn't just influence the model, it constitutes the model. Think about that. The data isn't just an ingredient. It is the blueprints, the foundation, the entire reality for the model. So, what does good data even look like? Well, it really comes down to 4 key things. First, and this is a big one, it has to be accurate and correct. Then it needs to be complete, covering all the bases. It also has to be free of bias and truly representative. And finally, it's got to be relevant and up to date. The problem? Trying to get all of that right when you're dealing with web-scale data is, well, it's a huge, huge challenge. And as Module 6 points out, there's no silver bullet for filtering all this data. You can automate it, which is super fast and cheap, but it misses all the subtle stuff. You can use humans who are great at catching nuance, but that's slow, expensive, and people can be inconsistent. Or you can try a hybrid model, but that gets really complex. So no matter what, you're stuck in this trade-off between speed, cost, and how good the final result is. So what happens when that bad data inevitably gets through? You've heard the saying, garbage in, garbage out, right? Well, with these models, it's more like garbage in, garbage forever. Let's unpack what that means in modules 7 and 8. This is the path contamination takes, and it's pretty sneaky. First, bad data, like copyrighted text or private info, gets into the data set. The model doesn't know any better, so during training, it just straight up memorizes it. Now here's the tricky part. During evaluation, this makes the model look really smart because it's already seen the test questions. But that's just an illusion. When you deploy it in the real world, it suddenly fails on new tasks, or even worse, starts spitting out that harmful content it memorized.
And this is the really tough pill to swallow. You can't just patch a language model like a piece of software. You can try fine-tuning to suppress a problem, but all that does is put a Band-Aid on it. The original bad data is still lurking underneath. The only way to guarantee you've removed the problem is to retrain the whole thing from the ground up. And we're talking about a process that is incredibly expensive and time-consuming.
Okay, so let's bring this all together and look at the future. In our live section covering modules 9 and 10, we'll see the real-world consequences of these failures, and more importantly, what the path forward looks like for building AI we can actually rely on. And believe me, these aren't just what-if scenarios. This stuff is already happening. We've seen lawyers get in serious trouble for citing legal cases that an AI completely made up. We've seen models recommend code with known security holes. Hiring tools have learned and then amplified existing biases. And maybe scariest of all, we've seen models give out dangerous medical misinformation with total confidence. These are major failures, and every single one traces back to bad data. So, how do we fix this? The answer isn't some magical new algorithm. It's about good old-fashioned engineering discipline. It means things like data provenance, knowing exactly where every single piece of your data came from. It means adversarial testing, where you are actively trying to break your own model to find its weak spots. You need versioning and a way to roll back if something goes wrong. And maybe most importantly, we have to invest in explainability, tools that let us look inside the black box and understand why a model said what it said. And all of this leaves us with one big final question to think about. Is the future of AI really about building better algorithms, or is it about curating better data? It really makes you wonder if the next huge leap forward won't come from a smarter model, but from just giving the models a better, cleaner, more truthful library to learn from. Something to think about.